Welcome to DigitalK.
Today with my three panelists who have basically been instrumental in funding the startups and scale-ups of the CEE region and really trying to boost the unicorns. I think what we'd like to do today is discuss a little bit what it takes to fund the companies in a region like here that's really growing and what needs to be done in order to be able to take that further in the future. I think we've had a couple of panels and fireside chats before us that really went into depth when it comes to numbers and figures, and I think here I'd more try to have a personal perspective from you guys as to what it takes to do this. And I think maybe I'd just like to start with you, Guillaume. I mean, Credo Ventures is let's say an institution when it comes to the CEE region with big investments like UiPath, and I'd love to know a little bit more from you about essentially what you guys have been doing and what you've personally been doing with Credo Ventures in order to push the CEE forward.
Sure. So I think, and this is exactly what Credo Venture was set up for 10 years ago now, which is funny that you would call it an institution because it's only been 10 years. But yeah, coming on our third fund, I guess that does give us a bit of a track record. And for these 10 years, I think the focus has been on educating the local entrepreneurship scenes in most of the markets we focus on across Eastern Europe. Educating them and trying to apply best practices that we've observed in Silicon Valley and more mature ecosystems, meaning taking small stakes at the early stages, pushing for the hyper growth, pushing for the ambition, because there's a risk attached to taking VC money. There's a bit of it's a double-edged sword, and so I think one of the biggest work we have to do is up front of making investment decisions. It's almost like we have to decide whether we invest in a startup, but we want the founders to also make a conscious decision of taking VC money, and that's a decision they need to make on their own, which we need to help them make, obviously. We like it better if they decide that they want to, because that's a good sign. That means they want to grow and they want to go for the unicorn targets. But it's an exchange rather than a one-way pitch and us then deciding. So educating, speaking with the founders, telling them very clearly what it means to take VC money, and making sure that there's an alignment in the ambition and the goals that you set when you accept the investment.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, Hristo, I'm really interested to have a little bit more intro for those of you here in the room that don't know you. Obviously, I think working for EIF, there's a lot that you've been doing so for the region and working with different funds here. So sort of what's your take and perspective on that, and if you can tell us a bit more about yourself.
Sure, thanks. Well, EIF, we are, as an institutional investor, we exclusively invest in VC funds. So we are an LP. We don't invest directly in startups and in tech companies. And as institutional investor, we are a public institutional investor. We are the largest one in Europe. Annually commitments of 3 billion euro or more in more than 100 VC and private equity funds across Europe. And this is pretty much what we are doing for the past 20 years. And what we see actually, because the topic today is and the buzz is about unicorns, is that of course, the reality check is that the unicorns across Europe are less than 20, around 15% of in terms of number globally. So we are still far behind US and China, or even Israel and other places. But the good news is that there is an explosive growth in the past 3 years. And if we talk about unicorns, if this discussion was like 4 or 5 years ago, we'll be talking about almost exclusively what's happening in London or Berlin or Paris or Stockholm, while the reality today is that in Europe, all those new unicorns, actually more than half of the European countries, member states, have their own unicorn today. So and we talk about a new pattern. It's not, and Central and Eastern Europe is definitely part of it. It's not only Estonia, it's not only Czech Republic with AVG, it's not only Romania now with UiPath, etc. There is a whole new pattern, and there are so many companies that are going towards the unicorn status in Bulgaria, but also in Greece, in Croatia, in everywhere.
Okay. And talking about that, like Apostolos, I'm very curious. You're the one in here is probably the least invested in a traditional way when it comes to the CE, having most of your investments sort of in Greece and the UK, but at the same time you are expanding that and looking into this. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do at VentureFriends?
Yeah, so initially the idea for VentureFriends was to support the Greek ecosystem because 2 years ago when we launched our first fund, there was not availability of capital and there was not access to people with relevant experience in the ecosystem. But from day one, we wanted to support the Greek entrepreneurs, but also connect them with the CE region and with Europe in general. So that's why one way to achieve that is to obviously invest capital and connect people, but it's also investing outside of your home country in order to forge relationships. And that's why we have tried to do investments in the UK, in Poland. We have been involved in a few startups, and we have been in touch with the Bulgarian ecosystem, with Launch Hub, for instance. And the idea was always that Europe as a whole, we have to up our game. And this, especially in our region, it becomes even more prominent as a question, as a topic. So we have played our role in our ecosystem. We have done a few investments, and some of our companies have managed to go global or become at least European. And we are happy pursuing the same goal and the same vision.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, funny that you just mentioned we have to up our game. I think that's the perception that a lot of people hear when I talk to different individuals at DigitalK were mentioning, and obviously Dealroom, their stats are showing that there is a lot of promising companies and VCs here in the region, but that is not there yet. Like, from your perspective, like, what is it going to take to be able to up our game? What's the plan for the CE region to actually be able to catch up with the rest of Western Europe and also the US and Asia?
I can jump on that. I think what the region needs most is more exits so that we get more rich angels who've done it. Either they don't even have to be founders themselves, but if they can be early employees of successful companies. Maybe setting the bar at the unicorn is a bit premature for the region. I don't know that it's, I mean, of course, if you can get there and maybe even pass it in the case of UiPath, it's great, but exits in the 9-digit million, well, 9 digits implying millions range, that's going to make quite a lot of early employees wealthy, especially personally wealthy. They'll have gone through the experience. They'll understand what it means to operate in a hyper-growth, super fast environment. They'll back these early tickets, early entrepreneurs that just need a 50 to 100K ticket to give it a try. They'll mentor them and advise them, and then I think the second generation of startups will be more likely to hit the unicorn status. So right now it's happening, and it's definitely happening really fast. When we speak of Credo being set up 10 years ago, it's like the perspective is completely different, and that's great. But we need more of it, and just more exits, more rich people.
More exits. Hristo, what about you?
I think I was really impressed by the Dealroom data, but it actually captures a bit of a historical data for the last 3 years. And if we just think the kind of the speed and the growth of the venture capital business and ecosystem pretty much everywhere, not only in our region, in Southeastern Europe, I'm pretty sure the statistics will be even more amazing in a couple of years from now. Because, and maybe just for a minute to focus on our region, like Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, there are 15 equity funds that has closed successfully in less than 2 years, in the past 2 years. And most of them are venture capital. And most of them, which is and we are very enthusiastic about it, we see more and more private capital joining the game. We see great interest from pension funds, etc. So these are 15 VC funds and probably another 10 that are getting closer to first round closings this year and next year. So the amount of venture capital that is going to be only in this region, in Southeastern Europe, will get something between 800 million to 1 billion euro in the next 2 to 3 years. So there is an amazing opportunity to grow the venture capital ecosystems, and the results we can see the yearly results from the statistics already. Yeah. But of course, there are many challenges. Still, the venture capital funds in Central and Eastern Europe, in terms of size, are rather small. I mean, across Europe, the average size of a VC fund in Europe is like almost 3 times smaller than US, meaning it's getting easier and easier to get acceleration, startup, seed capital, Series A, maybe Series B. But if you really want to scale fast, if you look for investment rounds of 10 plus million euro, it's actually very difficult still in Central and Eastern Europe to find local VCs. And this is part of the reason why we see a lot of scale-ups really migrating to US and to London really early on, rather than staying in this region. So one of the challenges and the developments that we hope to see in the next few years is really upgrading this venture capital industry with larger regional operating scale-up VC funds that can invest more than 10 million euro in rounds.
But do you see the regional funds' job as also taking care of the Series B and beyond? Because we see our job as kind of helping the locals graduate, and then there's other funds that can take care of B. By the time you're B, you're international, you're not CE anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the trend right now, and the better trend is that as soon as you can move to London and the US, it's better, because the valuations are higher, of course. The investors have richer, deeper pockets, but also the market is still there. Your global market is still predominantly there. But we see a lot of great opportunity to develop not only country-specific, but regional players, like 50 to 100 million euro VC funds, that can really support scale-ups in the region, and the opportunity is huge.
That I agree.
You were just mentioning right now, and I'm very curious to see the perspective here. Once you take VC like from abroad, you're not really CE anymore. What is your general take on this when it comes to a company like Leanplum, for example, that has a Bulgarian founder that would be considered here as one of the success stories in Bulgaria, but that's incorporated in San Francisco and seen by the rest of the world as an American company? Like, does that count? What are the metrics that you guys are actually using to determine whether that is a company that is successful in the CE or not?
It definitely is a CE company, because that's where it started from, and that's where the tech typically stays. And I think this is the case for Bulgaria. It's also the case for Greece, that many companies that make it to the US, like Workable or Blueground, they still retain the majority of their employees in Greece. And actually this is a benefit, because both the cost of having the tech team in Greece, as well as the retention of the people and the morale, is much higher. Just wanted to answer the previous point, which is very important about the landscape in the sea, which we mentioned, and certainly EIF has played a tremendous role in helping the VC ecosystem in those countries. So the capital, I think, is solved. Now what we need to solve is the mentality issue, the sense of urgency, the ambition level of founders. I think this is what we need to change, and that's why the successes play this role. Successes like Leanplum or UiPath. First of all, they show to everybody that this is possible. It's possible to start a company from the CE region and eventually make it a huge company. The second is that the employees who work for those companies, and they are in the local ecosystem, they get exposure to a different working style. They up their game, and they see what it is to work for a globally competitive company. This has a tremendous effect for them, and this effect actually is dispersed in the ecosystem, because people talk around, and suddenly you realize what it is to have a local startup competing for market share in your market, and then working for a global company.
As you're talking about changing mentality, I think one of the things that we discussed yesterday is obviously investors, and in this case, like LPs, are very important, but you also really want to try to focus on private investments. And you personally have brought a lot of people in Greece to the table to be able to invest in a success story that made them realize that there's actually money to be gained there. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
That's a good point. I mean, I think a very important role of an investor is to have a strong belief about something, about the portfolio companies. Of course, not all of them will be successful, but when you gain conviction, it is about convincing other people to join you. And this way, this is how you grow the ecosystem. This is how you help yourself and the whole investor community, because anybody who is exposed as an angel investor or as an LP in a fund that will produce returns eventually will become an investor and will tell other people to join him as an investor in the asset class of the VC. And this is what has happened in Silicon Valley. We're all talking about Silicon Valley. This is something that happened over years. So people made money from investing, and everybody followed. And it became a domino effect. And this is what we need to do in this region. We need to have more people involved into investing in startups. We need to have the founders reinvest. We need to have the investors reinvest and gather more investors.
Okay.
Maybe just to take the example that you mentioned about Greece, about Workable, one of the fantastic startups that are now US-based, of course. We have to realize that we live in a region today that is already on the radars of the largest investors in the world and the top VCs from Silicon Valley. So as long as you create a superior recruitment platform, actually the top guys from Silicon Valley will come and invest in you. So it's not a question whether you can close a 50 million plus round, because Workable have now more than 100 million euro of dollars?
In total, they have raised more than 80,
so by the time you become visible for the top VCs that can really give you a huge round, there are still a lot of challenges, like in the Series A and Series B rounds, and this is where we actually expect most of the developments in the next 2 years from this available VC capital in the region.
I think we all agree on this part, that there's definitely a need for people here to work a little bit more close together, to reinvest, to be involved in the region and sort of like keep giving back. Guillaume, like what would be sort of your take for all of the VCs in the room and all of the VCs in the CEE in general, people that are looking into investing, in being able to sort of like bring that forward, aside from what we've already mentioned?
Again, I might make some enemies or make some friends, depending on the answer. Right?
That's the point. Go ahead.
So I think for the VCs of the region, and assuming that we agree on the goals of applying best practices, because there's also been a lot of public money allocated to slightly less experienced, potentially investment managers who might tend to take too much equity at the early stages, or might tend to take up too much attention from the founders. So on that basis, I think, and it's already happening, there's usually pretty good working relationships among most of the funds. Each country now is starting to have at least one or two, if not more, micro/small VC taking care of their local ecosystems. And there's a lot of deal sharing and co-investments happening, which is great for spreading the risks across the region. And leveraging the talent and the connections of each VC. It's funny because some say we co-invest because we lack conviction, and if it was a good investment, you would just do it yourself. Maybe there's a bit of that for sure, but I think it's also there is benefit in having more people at the table, assuming that there's not too many people, and that all the people around the table are focused on the same goal. So, continuing what's already happening, we have co-investments with a lot of the VCs here. We have one with LaunchHub, one with Neo Ventures, not yet with 11, if we talk about Bulgaria.
Yes.
But it will happen. And as long as we all continue with the same goal, I think it should work out eventually.